Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. As you all know, our main focus on this channel is and always will be directed towards college football, but today we are making an exception, bringing you our special analysis of the 2019 NCAA Tournament. We'll be breaking down the bracket region by region all the way to the national championship, and we're going to start with the East region, headlined by the #1 overall seed, Duke Blue Devils, arguably one of the most fun teams to watch in all of college basketball this year. And so it's no surprise that, of course, we have Duke advancing past the round of 64, taking care of the winner of North Carolina Central or North Dakota State. Now, this is when the bracket gets fun. It's right below that, starting with the very tough-to-pick 8 versus 9 matchups, starting with VCU, Virginia Commonwealth, and number 9, Central Florida, UCF. A very difficult matchup when you're picking your brackets. These 8 and 9 seeds usually are 50-50 matchups and can truly go either way. But we are picking the Knights of Central Florida to advance to face Duke in the round of 32. VCU has a major question on whether their star player Marcus Evans will be back and healthy for this matchup, while Central Florida has a very strong defense led by 7'6" Taco Fall. Also, on top of that, they have beaten Houston and Cincinnati, very high seeds in this NCAA tournament. Houston a 3 seed, Cincinnati a 7 seed. We will cover both of them later on. But I believe that UCF's defense will be the key, especially if Virginia Commonwealth is not fully healthy. The Knights advance to the round of 32. Now, it is March Madness. It's called March Madness for a reason. We enjoy upsets, and we are going to be picking a lot of upsets in this bracket analysis here. Our first big one coming with the 5-12 matchups, one of the most common upsets, Mississippi State and Liberty taking on each other, and I have the Flames advancing to the round of 32, upsetting the Bulldogs of Mississippi State. And I truly believe that the Bulldogs were ranked a little too high in this year's bracket. I don't think a 5 seed was where the Bulldogs should have been. A very impressive season that Quindary Weatherspoon and his brother Nick accomplished for the Bulldogs, getting them back to the NCAA tournament. But I think Liberty, a team that can get extremely hot, especially from beyond the arc, will be able to get hot here against the Bulldogs and advance to the round of 32. I think Mississippi State should have been somewhere around a 6 seed, maybe even a 7 seed. I believe that the committee made a mistake there, and it will show as they go up against a very balanced Liberty Flames offense. Moving on down here, Virginia Tech and St. Louis, a 4-13 matchup. This is a very good chance for an upset here. We have seen in multiple recent years a 13 seed upsetting a 4 seed. We're not going to pick that here, though. We do believe that Virginia Tech will get the job done here against St. Louis, who was just around 500 but did win their conference to get to the NCAA tournament. I think the Hokies have no trouble against the Billikens here of St. Louis now, but it is extremely possible they could pull off this upset. They're getting hot at the right time, but I think the Hokies just have too much there and are too battle-tested to lose to St. Louis here. Maryland playing the winner of Belmont and Temple, the 6 seed and the 11 seed. Also a very common upset that we can see during March Madness, but I do not think that Belmont or Temple is just going to have enough power to upset the Terrapins of Maryland. Now, Maryland, of course, a team that has struggled offensively. That is something that we do have to keep in mind here. Temple playing in the American Athletic Conference against teams such as UCF, Cincinnati, Houston. If they can pull off a win over Belmont, I think they stand a better chance against Maryland than the Belmont Bruins would. But I think Maryland, in the end, will advance to the round of 32. And then we see a major upset here. LSU, the 3 seed, taking on the 14th seed Yale Bulldogs. Now, this is one that I think a lot of people are going to criticize me for, and quite frankly, that's okay. LSU, though, a team that I am not very confident in this 2019 NCAA tournament. Even if LSU were to defeat Yale in the round of 64, I do not think LSU will advance to the Sweet 16. And here's why. We all know that all the turmoil and all the off-the-court issues that LSU is having with their head coach, Will Wade. And I believe that did show in the SEC tournament when they did lose to Florida in that quarterfinal round. Now, LSU, plenty of talent. Tremont Waters, Naz Reid, a very solid offense to go with the defense that I think is underrated. But Yale getting hot at the right time, winning the Ivy League. They're known for pulling off upsets just a few years ago, upsetting Baylor as a 5-12 matchup. I think Yale does go in here and upset LSU, whose mind I do not think will be in the right place. Yale advances to the round of 32. We see one of our first major upsets in the East region here. Moving down to our final 2 matchups of the round of 64, we do have Louisville taking on Minnesota, a 7-10 matchup, and a matchup that would be much more intriguing had Rick Pitino still been coaching with the Cardinals. He would be going up against his son, Richard Pitino, with the Golden Gophers, but we all know how that ended up shaping up. Louisville, a team that faced one of the toughest schedules in the NCAA this season, yet still was able to manage 20 wins. And I'm actually surprised they were 7. I may have bumped them up so far to a number 6. Now, Minnesota, a team that was getting hot at the right time, did make a tiny little run in the Big Ten tournament, But Chris Mack in Louisville, of course, him coming over from Xavier to take over the Louisville job, doing a phenomenal job this season. A team that I could see getting all the way to the Sweet 16. I think Louisville takes care of Richard Pitino and a Minnesota team that was kind of on the bubble but was able to sneak in there. And then Michigan State, Bradley, 2-15. Michigan State, as we all know, a couple years ago, losing to Middle Tennessee State as a 2 seed, Minnesota State being a 15 seed. Don't think they make the same mistake this year. The Spartans and Tom Izzo's team advance to the round of 32. Now, we do have Duke and Central Florida here. I do believe the Blue Devils advance. I don't really think that's up for much question. You have Zion Williamson, you have R.J. Barrett, you have Cam Reddish, you have arguably, they're saying, another Fab Five here with the Blue Devils. And obviously these guys being the top 3 recruits coming out of high school in the entire nation, all choosing to come play with the Blue Devils. If Zion Williamson can stay healthy, it is going to be very difficult for any team to defeat the Blue Devils in their quest for another national championship. I don't think Central Florida gives them much of a fight. Duke advances to the Sweet 16. Now we have Liberty and Virginia Tech. Liberty pulling off an upset over Mississippi State. And if they can remain high, especially beyond the arc, they might be able to pull off an upset here against the Hokies. I do not think that's going to be the case, though. I think Virginia Tech is able to advance and face off against an ACC rival in the Sweet 16, and we'll touch on that in a second. You have a 6-14 matchup here between Maryland and Yale. This is bound to be a very fun one. Yale, a team, when you see these underdog schools come in there and upset a team like an LSU or like Loyola Chicago did last year, upsetting Miami and then upsetting Tennessee and advancing all the way to the Final Four, when they get hot, they remain hot. Basketball is one of those sports where shooting is contagious, momentum is contagious, and it can carry on from round to round. Can their momentum continue against Maryland, a team that has struggled a little bit? I don't think it will be. I think their Cinderella run will come to an end. And Maryland, a team who might just be lucky to escape the round of 64, will advance all the way to the Sweet 16. And then Louisville and Michigan State, another matchup where I could potentially see a big-time upset here. Louisville, a team that I do not think is getting enough credit. Like I said, one of the toughest schedules they face, managed to get 20 wins, have competed a game in and game out with some of the top teams in the country. They're playing in the ACC, for God's sake, playing some of the toughest opponents in the nation. I mean, three of the 1 seeds in this NCAA tournament are all from the ACC: Duke, Virginia, and North Carolina. Louisville has a solid chance to beat Michigan State here, but I think the Spartans just have too much. Big Ten champions advance to face another Big Ten opponent. So we have an ACC matchup and a Big Ten matchup here in the Sweet 16. I believe Maryland, their Cinderella run comes to an end, getting the benefit of the doubt, facing off against an 11 seed, and then luckily, if it happens, facing off against Yale. So Maryland, a very favorable path to the Sweet 16 here. Michigan State ends that run. Duke and Virginia Tech faced off a couple times in the ACC this year. Duke will once again get the better of the Hokies and advance to the Elite Eight. And then this is the final for the East region. The East Final, East Championship, Duke defeats Michigan State, the 1 seed versus the 2 seed, and advances to the Final Four. I really do believe that there is not a single team that can beat Duke right now if their top 3 can remain healthy. I know they did lose a couple times over the course of the regular season. We're given battles in the ACC tournament, but I do not believe that anybody can beat Duke right now. I believe that Duke will advance to the Final Four, and we will have to wait and see who their opponent will be as we move on to the West region. Moving on to the West region, we have Gonzaga claiming the number 1 seed here. They will play the winner of Fairfield Dickinson and Prairie View A&M. No worries there. Gonzaga will advance to the round of 32. Then we have another 8-9 seed here between Syracuse and Baylor, and this is one of those 8-9 seed games where I actually feel fairly confident in this. I feel like the Orange will take fairly easy care of Baylor in this round. You know, Syracuse is just 2-7 versus top 25 teams this season, but finished 20-13 overall. Baylor, I'm quite surprised to see the Bears make it into the round of 64. You know, they finished 18-14, lost their star player, Tristan Clark, back in January. 18-14, a record that usually is not good enough for teams to slip in here, although their NET ranking was just good enough, and they did have some quality Quadrant 1, Quadrant 2 wins to get them into the tournament. However, Syracuse seems to be peaking at the right time. Yes, they did fall to Duke in the ACC tournament, but the Orange are prone to going on runs, much like they did many years ago. I think it's a 10 seed going all the way to the Final Four. I think Syracuse takes pretty easy care of Baylor, advances to play Gonzaga in the round of 32. And then we have Marquette as the 5 seed facing Murray State as the 12 seed. And this was a matchup that I was absolutely furious to see the committee arrange. And this is why. You have two of the most prolific players in all of college basketball going up against each other in this matchup. You have Marcus Howard of Marquette, who's averaging 25 points per game. And then Murray State's John Morant, who's averaging 24.6 points per game. And now, for most people, this would be, a matchup of dreams. You were going to see two of the top players in college basketball go up against each other. It should be a lot of fun. But this is a really bad opportunity here because one of those two teams, one of those two players is going home in the first round. I did not like this matchup one bit, but I am picking Marquette to advance to the round of 32. I feel that John Morant, as prolific as he has been, as fun as he has been to watch, he needs more help from Murray State, and he does not have that. I think Marquette, as a team combined, is just a little more whole, is going to be a little more better as a team to defeat Murray State here. I think they do advance to the round of 32, but this should be a high-scoring game, a lot of fun to watch. Murray State was going to be a team that I had advancing to at least the round of 32, maybe even the Sweet 16 had they been anywhere else. And it's still extremely possible to see Murray State win this game against Marquette. Not dogging on them. This is a very solid opportunity to see a 12 seed upset a 5 seed. I wish the committee had separated these two teams, though, maybe to meet at a later date or just putting them on opposite sides of the bracket. But nonetheless, Marquette winning that matchup. Florida State, Vermont, another 13 seed here that could give Florida State a little bit of trouble. But this Florida State team seems a little bit different from those that we have seen in the past, making it all the way to the ACC championship game before falling to Duke, beating Virginia in the ACC tournament. This is a very, very solid Seminoles team. Vermont, of course, winning their conference here is absolutely a threat. Not one that the Seminoles can afford to overlook, but I think this game will remain close for about the first half. Florida State pulls away late second half, advances to face Marquette 4-5 in the round of 32. Buffalo playing the winner of Arizona State in St. John's, 6 seed versus an 11 seed. Another major mistake, I believe, by the selection committee. There's been a lot of discrepancies between me and the committee so far. Buffalo loses 3 games on the year, and I know they're not playing in a very tough conference. They're playing the MAC. They did win the MAC tournament, but they lose 3 games on the year, and yet they get put as a 6 seed. I believe Buffalo should have been put much higher than a 6 seed here. Should not have to play Arizona State or St. John's, but regardless, Buffalo, a very scary team. We saw that last year. They defeated Arizona in the first round. Well, that was a major upset, busted a lot of brackets. People will know not to sleep on the Bulls this year. Buffalo defeats the winner of Arizona State, St. John's. My initial reaction would be to pick St. John's in that game, but really when you're picking your brackets, the play-in games don't matter unless you have them advancing farther than the first round. Buffalo advances to the round of 32 to face Texas Tech, who should take fairly easy care of Northern Kentucky. Now, a very intriguing matchup here between number 7 Nevada, 7 seed Nevada, and 10 seeded Florida, who really is lucky to be in the NCAA tournament here. The Gators, winning 2 games in the SEC tournament over Arkansas in convincing fashion, and then a major upset over LSU. And I really believe that that's what got the Gators into that 10 seed position. Had they not beaten LSU, you may have seen Florida playing a play-in game as number 11 seed or somewhere around there. The Gators, very lucky to be here. Mike White gathering his troops, able to really make a run that tournament. That's why they're there. Now, Nevada, Eric Musselman, a phenomenal run that the Wolfpack had last year. People will once again know not to sleep on Nevada. I believe that the Wolfpack should have been a little bit higher than a 7 seed. I didn't really agree with all of the seedings that the committee did this season. I think Nevada defeats a Florida team that, yes, is getting hot at the right time. Very important in basketball. But Nevada, a team that should be angry, not only because of their seed, but because of kind of some of the losses they had at Mountain West Conference play this season. They defeat Florida, looking to have another run, much like they did last year. Michigan taking easy care of Montana in a rematch of last year's opening round. And that sets up our round of 32 in the West region. Now, Gonzaga and Syracuse. Would not be surprised to see the Orange pull off an upset here, but Gonzaga, despite losing in their conference championship game, Mark Few is going to once again rally his troops. Gonzaga averaging 84.5 points per game, and once again having a pretty solid defense there, just allowing 67.1 points per game. Should be able to take care of a Syracuse team that I think, is a very dangerous 8 seed, and usually we do see an 8 seed upset a 1 seed, but I think the Gonzaga does advance here. Marquette, Florida State, would not be surprised to see Marcus Howard have his breakout game here in the round of 32 against a Florida State squad. But I think in the end, the Seminoles will be the ones to advance. I mean, when you beat Virginia by, I think it was 10 points in the ACC tournament, hang with Duke for the majority of the time in the ACC title game, this is a Florida State team that I would not be surprised to see make a run to the Sweet 16 and maybe even beyond. I do believe they get a win over Marquette. to set out that date against the one-seeded Gonzaga. And then you have Texas Tech and Buffalo. This is really where we see, I think, the biggest upset in the West region. Texas Tech is a team that has a very strong defense, allows just 64.7 points per game. They do not have a very strong offense. Buffalo does. They average 84.8 points per game. Something's got to give here. Either Buffalo's offense will be shut down by Texas Tech's defense, or Texas Tech's defense will allow too many points against the Bulls team, and Buffalo will advance to the Sweet 16. I think that's what happens. I think Buffalo exploits some weaknesses in Texas Tech. They don't have enough firepower to keep up with this high-octane Bulls offense, and Buffalo pulls off an upset over the Red Raiders, advances to the Sweet 16 to take on Michigan, who will end Nevada's another quest for a Cinderella-type run. Nevada, very, very talented, has plenty of talent there, but Michigan, a team that made the Big Ten championship game, was one of the best teams in the country for about the first couple months of the season before kind of petering off there towards the end. Still very, very impressive. Even though they did fall in the Big Ten championship to Michigan State, they defeat Nevada, advance to the Sweet 16. Then they play Buffalo. We're going to go backwards here. They will play Buffalo, the Bulls here, who, like I said, very prolific offense. Michigan is just, once again, going to be too much. They have a lot of talent here, and we saw that last year, but when they made a run all the way to the national championship game before falling to Villanova, I believe they have that type of talent to do it again this year. They take care of Buffalo in their Cinderella run, advanced to the final of the Western region. And then you have Gonzaga and Florida State. Would not be surprised to see the Seminoles take care of business here, but Gonzaga, a team that Mark Few, I really think, a lot of people seem to disregard them, saying they don't play in a very tough conference. How will they fare against teams such as Florida State from the ACC, one of probably the best conference in college basketball? But Gonzaga does advance, I believe, to the final to face Michigan. But in the end, it's the Wolverines who will win the West region and square off against Duke in the Final Four. And now we're going to move on to the other side of the bracket and talk about the South region. Virginia claims the #1 seed in the South region, going up against 16th-seeded Gardner-Webb. And of course, as we all know, last year Virginia made history as the first ever #1 seed to lose to a 16th seed, and hopefully history will not repeat itself for the Cavaliers. I do not think it will. They certainly will not allow Gardner-Webb to defeat them. Virginia will advance to the round of 32. Tony Bennett doing, once again, a phenomenal job with the Cavaliers, claiming the #1 seed in the ACC tournament. But the problem with Virginia, and the problem that it might pose for them as they progress through the rest of the tournament, is the fact that they only average 67.5 points per game. And that has been kind of the mantra for Tony Bennett and his teams at Virginia. They don't score a lot of points because their defense is so good. They are allowing just 53.4 points per game over the course of this season. So they win games based on their defense, which is how you win championships, but it has not fared very well for the Cavaliers during his time there at Virginia. Moving down to an 8-9 seed matchup, Ole Miss taking on Oklahoma. And this is another one of those 8-9 games that, as we've said before, are 50-50, but I feel pretty confident in picking Ole Miss in this game. They have Breein Tyree and Terrence Davis. Kermit Davis, for one thing, winning SEC Coach of the Year, and rightfully so, getting Ole Miss to the NCAA Tournament in his first year in Oxford. Oklahoma, a team that really was borderline, maybe shouldn't have even been in the NCAA tournament. They have lost 8 of their past 12 games, finished the season 19-13, and lost to West Virginia, a team that I think only had 12 or 13 wins at the time in the Big 12 tournament. That was very early on in that tournament. Oklahoma, lucky to be in there, lucky to be a 9 seed in the NCAA tournament. I think Ole Miss and that very, very potent offense, they are very good at the free throw line, and Breein Tyree and Terrence Davis, when they get hot, they are very tough to stop, will beat the Sooners in advance to the round of 32 to take on Virginia. Then you have your 5-12 matchup here. And as we mentioned, these 5-12 matchups are usually where you see some big-time upsets. It is very common to see a 12 seed upset a 5 seed, and we have one right here. I believe that Oregon will defeat Wisconsin, the 5 seed. Oregon winning the Pac-12, being a big-time bid stealer. They were really there, sitting there on the bubble. Many people had them projected to miss the tournament for a while, went on a run and upset Washington in the Pac-12 championship game to clinch a spot in the NCAA tournament. And I believe with the way they finished the season, that 12 seed is pretty low for them, and Wisconsin should be very scared of facing off against the Ducks in this game. I think Oregon, in the end, Dana Altman doing a phenomenal job with them, will advance, defeat Wisconsin, who's kind of been beat up a little bit, didn't have the best of runs in the Big Ten tournament. It should be a phenomenal game to watch, but I think Oregon will advance. Kansas State, UC Irvine. Another big game that some of the analysts out there are thinking could be a big-time upset with UC Irvine defeating Kansas State. And the big one here is Irvine, look, had 30 wins this season. It was a phenomenal run for them. Kansas State, though, if they don't get Dean Wade back, I might come back and change this pick. And we might not know that until they face off. I believe it's on Thursday. But Dean Wade, the star player for the Wildcats, if he's not back, Irvine's going to have a major boost in this game, might be able to pull off the upset. If he is back, I believe that's enough to send Kansas State into the round of 32. These 4-13 matchups are pretty tricky. This is one that you're not going to want to overlook. You can make multiple brackets. You might want to pick UC Irvine a couple times if you do multiple brackets, because this is a game that scares me a little bit, but I think the Wildcats will have just enough to get them into the next round. Then a big game here, Villanova, the defending national champions, taking on St. Mary's, another big-time bid stealer who won their conference over Gonzaga, pulling off a very big upset in that championship game. And I'm pulling another huge upset here, sending St. Mary's to the round of 32, upsetting Villanova, the defending national champions. Villanova, this has not been the type of year that they have wanted to see. You know, this is very uncharacteristic of the Wildcats. Yes, they won the national championship last year. Yes, they won the Big East. Congratulations to Jay Wright and what he has done after they lost so much from that championship team last year to kind of replace them and still get them into a very decent seed here. But St. Mary's, I think, is getting hot, and I've mentioned this a lot, getting hot at the right time. They're going to be riding that momentum after a huge win over Gonzaga. Had they not won that, they would have been a bubble team, may or may not have gotten into the NCAA tournament. They are very dangerous, a very dangerous shooting team. I think that's going to be enough to send them over a big-time upset over the Wildcats and propel them into the second round. So that's one you're going to want to keep your eye on. A very intriguing matchup here. Will be very, very close. And in the end, though, I think the Gales get the win to take on Purdue, who should take fairly easy care of Old Dominion. Carson Edwards doing a phenomenal job with the Boilermakers. I think St. Mary's and Purdue will make a very, very good round of 32 matchup. And then down here, closing out the final section of this round of 64 in the South region, Cincinnati and Iowa. And this was a seed that I was absolutely furious about when the selection show aired Sunday night. Cincinnati getting a 7 seed should have been much higher, in my opinion, at least a 6 seed, if not higher than that. Cincinnati winning the American Athletic Conference Championship over Houston, who landed a 3 seed. I believe the Bearcats finished just 28-6 on the year, so a very phenomenal year for them. The fact to see them so low at number 7 just absolutely infuriated me. They face off against an Iowa team who has done fairly well in the Big Ten. It's got a pretty big trap game for Cincinnati, in my opinion, but I think the Bearcats will be angry. They win their conference. They get put in a very low seed, have to go up against Tennessee if they get a win over the Hawkeyes, and I believe that they will do just that. Cincinnati, a very, very dangerous team, was good enough to beat Houston, was good enough to run through the entire American Athletic Conference. I think they beat Iowa in a very close game and will face off against Tennessee, who should have no issue against Colgate, the 15 seed. Starting back up at the top in the round of 32, Virginia and Ole Miss. We mentioned that Virginia wins games based on their defense. Ole Miss winning games based on their offense. And towards the end of the season, Ole Miss was struggling a little bit, losing in the opening round of the SEC tournament, or in their first game of the SEC tournament, to Alabama, who still missed the field. Ole Miss not going to be enough for this stifling Virginia defense. The Cavaliers move to the Sweet 16. Oregon, Kansas State, the 4 seed and the 12 seed. Oregon, a team that could be your Cinderella team of this year. Getting hot at the right time. Dana Altman doing a phenomenal job with his crew. But Kansas State, if Dean Wade's not back for the opening round, should be back for the round of 32. I think they have enough to propel them over a win against Oregon, who could be a little beat up in what should be a physical matchup against the Badgers. Purdue, St. Mary's. Potentially another big Cinderella story. St. Mary's upsetting Villanova, sitting at an 11 seed. We all know that previous 11 seeds have had quite a bit of run. Loyola Chicago just last year. VCU many years ago, making it from the first 4 to the final 4. St. Mary's, could it be the year for them? Could they be the Cinderella story? I don't think so. I think the Boilermakers get the job done. Purdue, very high seed and a very kind of underrated team. I don't think a lot of people talk about them. Could be a team that could sneak all the way to the Final 4, if not the Elite 8. And then Cincinnati and Tennessee, a game of what could have been last year. I believe they were in the same division or same side of the bracket last year. Just weren't able to do that. Cincinnati getting upset, I believe, by Nevada. Tennessee by Loyola Chicago. This year, the Volunteers and Bearcats will meet up against each other. Tennessee, led by Grant Williams, Rick Barnes as their head coach, and Admiral Schofield, who may have had the dunk of the year in that SEC tournament against Mississippi State. too much firepower on the offensive side of the ball. On offense for the Volunteers, I think they get the win over the Bearcats. Cincinnati, a very unfortunate exit for them, a very unfortunate early exit for them. Had they been a higher seed, I could have seen them very well going to the Sweet 16, if not farther. But going up against this very tough Tennessee team, I just don't think is going to be a very suitable matchup for them. Tennessee advancing to the Sweet 16. And then you have your top 4 seeds from the South facing off against each other. Kansas State, lucky to get past UC Irvine, lucky to get past Oregon or Wisconsin because they did struggle a little bit in the Big 12 tournament, losing to Iowa State. Will not have enough to get past Virginia, who has had previous early exits from the NCAA tournament, will not have one this year. And then down here, Purdue and Tennessee. This will be a heck of a matchup in the Sweet 16. Absolutely, but in the end, the Volunteers will be enough. I believe, Purdue's built around. They have a very solid team, but Carson Edwards, the big-time player for the Boilermakers. Tennessee, too much altogether. I think as a team, as a whole, they are better than the Boilermakers. They will advance to the Elite Eight to take on the number 1 seed Virginia Cavaliers. And in the end, I think it's the Volunteers that advance to the Final Four from the South region. Virginia priding themselves on that defense. Tennessee, yes, did lose by 20 in the SEC championship to Auburn, but that's because Auburn, when they get heated up, especially from three-point land, are extremely, extremely difficult to beat. Virginia has that type of threat that Auburn has from beyond the arc, but I think in the end, Tennessee, knowing what they're up against, will be getting this job done against the Cavaliers and advance to the Final Four. A phenomenal job done by Rick Barnes, and we will have to see who they face off against in the Final Four as we break down the Midwest region. And we are down to our final region, the Midwest region, where North Carolina claims the 1 seed, and they will be taking on 16th seeded Iona. And of course, they shouldn't have any issue with that. The Tar Heels will advance to the round of 32. Now here we have another very intriguing 8 versus 9 matchup, and I think it's kind of been split. We say 8 versus 9 are usually 50-50 matchups. There are 4 of those in this year's tournament, as always. 2 of those we felt pretty confident on. This is another one where I feel kind of iffy on. I don't know whether to choose the Aggies of Utah State or the Huskies of Washington, who made the finals of the Pac-12 tournament but fell to Oregon, who was a 12 seed against Wisconsin, and who we do have upsetting the Badgers in their region. I'm going to pick the Aggies here, though. I think Utah State has one of the more prolific offenses. We saw that out there in the Mountain West. This is one that I think a team that gets kind of overshadowed. These tinier schools, they kind of get overshadowed, but had such a good record and such a prominent offense. I think they will be able to take care of Washington, who, yes, was the 1 seed in the Pac-12. Yes, made the Pac-12 championship, but did not look like the best team in the Pac-12 at the end of that Pac-12 tournament. I think Utah State pulls off the upset here, despite being a higher seed, advances to face North Carolina in what could be a very intriguing round of 32 matchup. Then we have Auburn and New Mexico State, the 5 seed taking on a 12 seed. And this is one of those 5-12 matchups where I'm very, very tempted to take New Mexico State, a team that many people had as a potential upset last year in the NCAA tournament, but a team here that has such a prolific offense. I mean, they put up so much points. But the same can be said for Auburn, that when they heat up, especially from behind the three-point line, they are one of the most dangerous teams and one of the most toughest teams to beat. We saw that in the SEC championship game. They started to heat up, beat Tennessee by 20 points in the SEC championship game. This has the chance to be a big-time shootout here, and would not shock me in the slightest to see New Mexico State upset the Tigers, but I do think that the SEC champions will advance to the round of 32, but might have to be a little bit scared on the way there. I think New Mexico State will give them a heck of a fight. Then we have Kansas at the 4 seed taking on Northeastern. And seeing Kansas as a 4 seed is pretty uncharacteristic for Bill Self and his Jayhawks. They did not have quite a great year. 9 losses. Still a very high seed, though. Have been battling a lot of injuries, though. This has not been the type of year that Kansas is used to, having such great success, being a 1 seed or a 2 seed. When I'm picking my brackets, when I'm doing most of my brackets, I will not have Kansas advancing very far. However, I do think they will be able to take easy care of Northeastern to have a great showdown against Auburn in the round of 32. Iowa State, Ohio State, an Iowa State team that did win the Big 12. They did defeat Kansas in that Big 12 championship game. So it's fitting that they would both be on the same side of the bracket in the same region, for that matter. They go up against an Ohio State team that was on the bubble there, but was able to sneak in as an 11 seed. And I was a little bit surprised to maybe not seeing them have to do a play-in game, or maybe even seeing them slip in among some other teams that I thought maybe should have gotten in. But the Buckeyes did slip in there. Iowa State, though, playing on a completely different level, went on a heck of a run in that Big 12 tournament to solidify themselves a spot. They were going to get in regardless. This certainly improved their seed. I think Iowa State takes care of the Buckeyes here, advances to the round of 32 against Houston, who has to face off against Georgia State. And as we all know, Ron Hunter and his Panthers over at Georgia State pulled off a major upset just a few years ago against Baylor, falling off of his stool, making a wonderful run in that NCAA tournament. Can he do it again? Can they find that magic? I don't think that's going to be the case. Houston, despite losing in the American Athletic Conference Championship game to Cincinnati, I think is the best team in that conference. And they are a veteran team. They have a lot of talent. They're extremely difficult to beat, very well balanced. Houston should take care of Georgia State and set up a very fun showdown against Iowa State in the round of 32. Kentucky should take care of Abilene Christian very easily as a 15 seed. The odds of Kentucky losing there very slim to none. Should set up a rematch, though, against Seton Hall in the round of 32. Now, Wofford, a team that has won 20 straight games. And it's phenomenal to see them sitting here at a 7 seed. It's very rare to see a team like that get such a high seed. Wofford, a very dangerous team, not one that many people wanted to see. Now, this is not a shoe-in win for Seton Hall, but I think Seton Hall had a phenomenal run that Big East tournament, going all the way to the championship game before losing to Villanova. This is a team that is very experienced, has a lot of talent. I think is more battle-tested than Wofford is. I think they will get a win over Wofford, advance to the round of 32, and set up that rematch against Kentucky, where the Pirates defeated the Wildcats early on in the season, I think all the way back in December. That was an absolute thrilling game. But in the end, Kentucky will be the one to get revenge, will advance to the Sweet 16, where they will take on Houston. And if you remember last year, Michigan was a number 3 seed facing off against Houston, the 6th seed, in the round of 32 before Michigan hit that buzzer beater to send the Cougars home and ruin their NCAA tournament chances. And Houston was a 6th seed at the time, and a team that I had going pretty far a couple of times last season. They were very, like I said, a veteran team, had a very good offense. Just being a 6th seed was a little low for them. Now the roles are reversed. Houston is a 3 seed, Iowa State a 6 seed. They're not obviously playing Michigan again, but can they get revenge? Can they avenge themselves after such a heartbreaking defeat in the round of 32 last year? And I think they will. This is a very dangerous Houston team that I do not think a lot of people are talking about. Houston, I have advancing to the Sweet 16 of the Midwest region. Up here at the top, North Carolina, Utah State. The Tar Heels should take easy care of the Aggies if they can shut down the Aggies' offense. They are a very hot shooting team. Like I said, a very dangerous team out of the Mountain West, and those smaller schools are very difficult to prepare for and a little bit difficult to know too much about. But I think the Tar Heels, led by senior Luke May, will get to get the job done there, advance, and face Auburn, who will pull off the upset against Kansas. I mentioned this has not been the type of Kansas team that we have seen in years past. Kansas, in recent years, has had fairly early exits from the NCAA tournament. They have not made the national championship since 2012 when they fell out to the hands of, I believe, Anthony Davis and Kentucky. So, Auburn, once again heating up here, assuming they can survive a very tough test in New Mexico State, I think will take care of Kansas, a team that is just really struggled down the stretch. 9 losses on the year, not characteristic of the Jayhawks. And Auburn Tigers, the SEC champions of the tournament, will advance to the Sweet 16 and take on North Carolina, where they will fall. The Tar Heels, too much talent, too much speed, and too good of a defense, I think, and will eventually shut down. Look, people get hot shooting, but eventually they've got to cool down. Auburn, they were hot against Tennessee. I think that carries over to the first 2 rounds. They will fall to the Tar Heels in the Sweet 16, but what a run by Bruce Pearl and his Tigers. North Carolina advances to the Elite Eight to take on the winner of Houston and Kentucky, and I believe that's the Cougars. John Calipari and his Wildcats always perform well in the NCAA tournament. It's very rare that you see the Wildcats have an early exit. Making the Sweet 16 is nothing to frown about, especially with the Kentucky team that at times has struggled and has not looked good. They lose to Seton Hall. They did make a heck of a run in the SEC. They lost to Tennessee in the SEC tournament, though, in heartbreaking fashion. And at times struggled at homes and struggled on the road at times against some teams that they probably shouldn't have. This is a very young Kentucky team going up against a veteran Houston team who I think is very balanced. So while this team will come close, or while this game will come close, it's going to come down to experience. I think Houston owns the edge there. The Cougars advance to the Elite Eight, number 1 seed versus number 3 seed there. Winner going to the Final Four, and that will, of course, be North Carolina. Once again, despite North Carolina having some youth on that team, experience in the coaching aspects and on their player aspects will play a role there. Battle-tested as well, North Carolina playing in the ACC. Those type of games, playing against such difficult opponents, ends up being a benefit for a lot of these teams going down the stretch in the NCAA tournament. They get a win against the Cougars, advance to the Final Four, and now our Final Four is set, and we will break down those 4 teams and who we have winning the 2019 NCAA tournament. And here we have our Final Four, 2 number 1 seeds and 2 number 2 seeds. And we'll start over here between Duke and Michigan, our first Final Four matchup. And you couldn't ask for a better matchup, in my opinion. 2 great head coaches in Duke's Mike Krzyzewski and John Beilein of Michigan. And you've got 2 very physical teams here, the ACC champions in Duke and then the Big Ten runner-ups in Michigan. A game that they probably should have won over their rival in Michigan State. Duke, as I mentioned, though, has the 3 top players in the entire nation coming out of high school at least. Zion Williamson, Cam Reddish, R.J. Barrett. Been one of the most physical teams over the course of this entire season. Now, of course, they need to stay healthy. If there were to be an injury in this NCAA tournament, then you could start to question if Duke has the chance to make a run all the way to the Final Four. But Duke was the number 1 overall seed for a reason. They weren't just a 1 seed, they were the number 1 seed out of all the teams in this field of 64. Michigan, on the other hand, as I said, has been a very, very physical team. The ability to force turnovers, the ability to convert off of those turnovers is going to be a very fun matchup here. But in the end, I think it's going to be the Blue Devils that will get the best of them. Duke, I think, owns the edge, especially in terms of size. They're going to be able to get the offensive rebounds when they need it. And I think they're going to be able to go to another national championship game. Over here on the other end, we have Tennessee taking on North Carolina. Once again, great head coach in Roy Williams and a great job by Rick Barnes over at Tennessee and what he has done with this program. I mean, taking them over just a few years ago, getting them as a 2 seed it was last year in the NCAA tournament, got knocked out rather early. Or maybe they were a 3 seed, but it got knocked out rather early. North Carolina here as a 1 seed, fairly easy path, I felt like, to the national championship game, or to the Final Four at least. In the end, though, I think it's going to be Tennessee. I think Tennessee, kind of like Duke, has a little bit more size, has a little bit more firepower, and once again, it comes down to experience, and they have that edge, I think, over North Carolina. Yes, North Carolina, I think, owns the edge when it comes to coaching. I think they have a handful of players that do have experience, such as Luke May, but Tennessee, Admiral Schofield, Grant Williams, and this Tennessee team overall has been so dominant for the most part of this SEC regular season, I think will get the win in a very physical matchup against the Tar Heels, which will set up a Duke versus Tennessee national championship game. And I really don't think you could ask for a better matchup here. This is going to be an extremely physical game. Both these guys have size. Both these guys have the ability to shoot. Both these guys have the ability to get offensive rebounds and get the boards. I mean, this is going to be, I think, could set up to be one of the greatest national championship games we've seen in a long time, if it can all play out. Of course, I would have nothing wrong with seeing North Carolina go over here and facing Duke and having the rivalry in the national championship game. How great would that be? But nonetheless, this is what we're picking, the Blue Devils and the Volunteers. And once again, I believe it's going to be Duke and their 3 superstars that get the win over the Volunteers. It's going to be a heartbreaking end for the Volunteers and the amount of work and the amount of talent they have brought in here, seeing their season come to an end like that. But Mike Krzyzewski is going to capture yet another national championship game after what has maybe been his best Duke team in history. Of course, they have to stay healthy, but I will go as far as say that I think this could be one of the best Duke teams he has ever had with the Blue Devils. I think they clinched the national championship over the Tennessee Volunteers, and that sums up our 2019 NCAA Tournament analysis. So, as you all know, you can do multiple brackets. These are just our predictions. We broke down region by region. This is our Final Four. This is our national championship pick. But regardless of where you go, CBS, ESPN, Yahoo, wherever it is, you can do multiple brackets. Go out there, share your predictions, share your brackets with us, and good luck as you work your way through March Madness. Now, as you watch this video, I know it has been extremely long. Check the description below. You can go and look at the regions. We'll put the time marks there so you don't have to watch the entire thing, although we do hope that you do. So make sure you go check that out. Good luck on your brackets. Enjoy March Madness. As always, please continue to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you next time on The Gridiron Expert.